Hi, I'm Ashley Adamson, and today we're going to talk about hormones and sex drive. Now, I have gone from the testosterone world into the estrogen world, and so I'm going to speak from that experience. Though I can speak to what it's like living in the testosterone world, I can't speak about going from the estrogen world and coming into the testosterone world. So I just want to draw that distinction right there. But yeah, I think this is a really important topic for a lot of trans women because you're basically, when you start transitioning and taking hormones, you're killing your testosterone, right? Like, how many of you girls remember the fear related to potentially killing your testosterone? Or if you're thinking about transitioning, is it something that's scary to you? Like, how much do you value your sex drive? And are you worried about it disappearing when your testosterone gets killed? Now, I think I should caveat this conversation we're about to have, because we're going to talk a lot about different kinds of sexual drive and sexual experiences, et cetera, et cetera. I should caveat all of this by saying that your body is your body, and your body will work differently than my body. And my results are not necessarily going to be everyone's results, but I would say that I'm in an area that feels pretty average from what I've heard from other trans women and experience with other trans women as well, which is now what we're going to get into. So I was really afraid, and the first year there was a lot of changes in terms of how this thing operated down there. So I'm pre-op or non-op. I haven't had an operation. So I've had what was a penis, and now I just call it my clit, work. And it worked for about the first 3 months when I started hormones, and then it started to not work in the same way. And I really remember noticing that when I tried to orgasm, and it just wasn't working the same way that I expected it to. You know, when you have a dick, you kind of just give it a little bit of some action, and eventually there's this sense of release that's very easy to kind of unlock and just let go and just have kind of spurt out, and there you go, that's your party. But after about 3 months of hormones and hormone blockers, the experience of sex became it became very hard to understand how to make myself orgasm. I could still feel things that were pleasurable, but I felt blocked. I felt like there was something there where I was used to having that orgasm at the tip or the head of my penis, where it just wouldn't open up an orgasm or come. It felt blocked or closed. And that kind of forced me to start exploring what sexual experiences and what kind of things are pleasurable to me now, because my body has changed. And this is a stereotype for women, but they always talk about it's mental arousal. It's mental arousal. This is the way that they want to be gotten off, or really kind of warmed up and then taken to. And with men, it's sort of well, you can just kind of hit the machine and kind of get it going, and you're all good, right? And so knowing this stereotype about mental arousal, I started to look into that more and to see how that was related. And honestly, it became a big part of my sexual process, and starting to realize that it was the mental aspects that I was really chasing and wanting, and that's what turned me on. I had a partner, and she was what looked like a cis woman, but she was actually intersex. And just regular platonic sex was no longer something that would get any action or get me to do things. And so we had to figure out ways in our sexual experience to really mentally turn me on now, because the game has changed. And I remember for about 6 months being very frustrated, maybe even 8 or 10 months, being frustrated that I really couldn't orgasm most of the time during sex. And I would say that's kind of become the norm is that, like a lot of women, I don't orgasm during sex. And that's honestly fine. I think like a lot of women want to have that orgasm, and I like having an orgasm, but the orgasm is not the same thing as the sexual experience. And I think that needs a distinction because the sexual experience, the way estrogen has affected my perception and the way that I'm seeing my sexual energy is it's become a lot more involved in the mental space and in the body and how the kind of the build of the experience happens. I think that's become a much, much bigger part. And that chasing of the mental stimulation has led me into kink and led me into thinking around more of like the mental, emotional things. You know, like bondage, for example, there's physical restraints there. And for some people, they can totally get off. And I put that in quotes because maybe not the typical way of getting off, but they get off in just being bound up and submitting to someone who has control over them. And that's kind of like something that I'm into. And the reverse can also be true. You know, maybe you like to bond a poor helpless girl and kind of like make it hard for her to move or wiggle around, you know, like these things are now, they don't require sexual stimulation, but they are sex because they're stimulating those parts in your brain that are making you feel aroused, making you have pleasure and kind of bringing you to your own level of mental orgasm. The first guy I dated basically just worked with my tits and made me almost like what I felt like orgasm just through titty manipulation, which was incredible. I was like, did I just come because there's nothing down there? And that's something also to mention for myself is you see all these like porns with like trans girls or traps or whatever, and they can like come. I don't come, like there's maybe a little bit of clear liquid. There's definitely no sperm because we killed all that sperm. But I don't know, if there's a guy watching here, don't expect all girls to have come or be able to come. A lot of guys want to help me orgasm, which I find really funny because the amount of attention that I get down there is way more as a girl than as a guy. You know, I really wanted blowjobs as a guy. It's something that I've always been into. And, you know, girls would give me blowjobs, but they weren't very good at it. And you get a blowjob for about 7 minutes, and then you kind of move on. But now that, you know, I'm a girl and my parts haven't changed, and that's kind of like now a hot part of it, I get a lot of head from girls and guys. And I really enjoy it. I do. But once again, the feelings are different. It doesn't feel the same. The pleasure is different. And literally on my clit, like the location of where I like to be stimulated is kind of at the tip. And that's it. You know, it works really, really differently. So kind of like to reflect on all of what I've said, I'd say my sex drive is much higher now that I'm on hormones. And that doesn't make sense on the surface because you think, well, I'm not actually horny or physically aroused. But a lot of that energy has transferred into mental arousal. And the thing with mental arousal is your brain is like this huge organism that like loves the idea of sex and can think about sex in a million different creative and imaginative ways. And that thing just keeps going and going and going. I don't know how, but my appetite seems to be larger than most men that I date. And maybe I just need to date hornier men, but I just haven't found a guy that can keep up with the level of kink and interest that I have in all the sexual experiences that I want. So, yeah, that's to say sex has become a lot bigger of a thing. And I think also when you transitioning is sort of like an admission of something that you're ashamed of. And I think that's a big part to also your sexuality in the sense that if you felt ashamed, you are willing to get back into embracing more of these sexual experiences and parts of yourself that you may have denied, been in denial of, being ashamed of, or not wanting to share with other people. And like, I mean, come on. Like, once I'm like, hey, I'm a trans girl, it's all out on the table. Like, these are my kinks. This is what I'm interested in. Are you willing to push me there? Let's go, you know? So I don't know. I hope that was helpful, talking about horniness and sex drive and things that we're interested in and how that changes. My sex experience has changed a lot, and for the better. Honestly, sex is way better now. And a part of that is just knowing myself and being true to who I am. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and it's lovely to see you. If you have any questions or thoughts or topics you'd like to suggest, please write me a comment down below, and I'll register them and kind of like put it in another video. Okay? Bye.